When Fred Hoiberg got fired this morning, it might have come as a surprise to him as he was prepared to coach an 11 a.m. practice. But let's face it, he's been on the hot seat ever since his first Bulls team didn't make the playoffs, and it's been roasting his butt ever since. The internet is filled with reports of Hoiberg's imminent departure over the past several years, and in the beginning, it was hard to pin the blame on him. He brought a successful coaching pedigree from Iowa State with tough-minded players and clever, team-oriented offense. However, his first roster was ill-suited to the type of play he was looking for. A 35-year-old Pau Gasol couldn't keep up, posting his second-worst field goal percentage of his career, and Derrick Rose couldn't figure out how to get good shots with an offense that was supposed to move the ball a lot. The first evidence of tension in the locker room came when Jimmy Butler called Hoiberg out for not coaching the team hard enough, which is always a huge problem for a first-year coach who's trying to connect with players, and an even bigger problem for Hoiberg, who is by nature a low-key coach in the mold of Brad Stevens. After the disaster of not making the playoffs that first year in the weak Eastern Conference, Pax had a chance to make some significant changes to the roster to help Hoiberg achieve his goals on offense. Instead, they brought in Rajon Rondo, Dwayne Wade, and Hoiberg's complete nightmare, Robin Lopez, a center who plays really hard but has such little offensive skill that it's almost 4-on-5 when he's on the court. And there was more of the same public griping about the players not being tough enough and accepting their roles. This time, fellow Marquette Warrior Dwayne Wade chimed in as well, and the subtext made it clear they placed much of the blame on Hoiberg. This team actually won one less game than the year before, but squeaked into the playoffs, having to win 7 of their last 9 games to barely grab the last spot in a tiebreak. Miraculously, they went up 2-0 behind the stellar play of Rondo, and there were indications that Hoiberg was out-coaching one of the best coaches in the league in Brad Stevens. But Rondo went down with an injury, and the Bulls lost the next 4 games. This mercifully ended the Jimmy Butler era, and in exchange, they got 2 starters in Chris Dunn and Zach LaVine, and the 7th pick, which became Lauri Markkanen. This was nothing short of a coup for Pax, who got rid of the chief Hoiberg antagonizer and brought in a lot more talent in one fell swoop. No one seemed to mind they tanked last year for a high draft pick, and tank they did. Justin Holiday and Denzel Valentine played the most minutes of anybody, but they spent a lot of time developing Chris Dunn into a starter, Bobby Portis into a real threat from both inside and out, and David Nwaba into a dependable role player. Coming into this year, they were primed to be a lot better by adding Jabari Parker to the mix. Injuries played a huge role as Markkanen missed the first 22 games of the season, and Chris Dunn only suited up for 1 game. Before we dissect what's happened this year, let's look at some advanced stats that reflect on Hoiberg's coaching. In an era where three-point shooting is vital, he only got to 11th in three-point frequency 1 year, and the rest of the time, his Bulls teams were way down the list. Of course, this also speaks to lack of three-point shooting, but believe it or not, a quick glance at each of his teams shows there were enough average to above average three-point shooters to indicate to me they should have shot a lot more of them. The highest rank of offensive rating his teams ever achieved was 21st in 2016-17. The rest of the time, they hovered closer to the bottom of the league. Since effort has been a key word in a lot of what we're hearing, I checked the defense in transition rankings over the years, and what started out great has steadily dropped off a cliff. This year, it wasn't hard to find some egregious examples of poor fast break defense, especially when Jabari Parker was involved. To start, Parker and Capella are even with each other, but by the time they both reappear on the screen, Parker has lagged behind, and because of this, forces the much smaller Holiday to have to pick him up under the hoop. Parker was the first guy back on this break, but cannot see that Lopez is already in position to stop the ball, even pointing to it, leaving a cutter wide open to the rim for a layup. Here's an example of bad effort and bad awareness. As he just jogs back on defense, he doesn't see that Zaza needs to be picked up under the hoop. When Pachulia is getting a lob, you know you've done something wrong. On the court, the best way to score is to hurry down and beat the defense back. Firing up a long upcourt pass is worth the risk when the reward can be so great. Just like using Robinhood to invest in the stock market. Using Robinhood's app is a non-intimidating way to begin investing, and they don't charge any fees. Right now, they'll give you a free stock like Apple, Ford, or Sprint to help build your portfolio. Sign up by going to breakdown.robinhood.com now and find out how easy Robinhood is to use. And you'll be better off than the Bulls this year, who have not invested in their future with all these long two-point shots. This year, the Bulls are ranked 19th in three-point frequency, caused by the long two-point shot stylings of Jabari Parker and Zach LaVine. And just look at where they rank by their position in long mid-range frequency. Even though Parker was average at making these types of shots, it had to be completely frustrating to Hoiberg to see time and again his inability to maintain spacing and then choose bad shot after bad shot. I like how he quickly pushes the ball up here until the defense stops him near the lane. The offense looks like it's going to snap into some good movement. Instead of a decent look at a catch and shoot three, he does a one-dribble pull-up from 21 feet. Or this doozy, as he brings it up and rather than wait for something to materialize with the off-ball screen, just jacks up a contested 18-footer with 17 seconds on the clock. On this screen and roll, it was a textbook example of how to generate a three with a short roll, but instead he slides into another 19-footer. Hitting this only serves to encourage him to take these bad shots. When it came to poor shot selection, Zach LaVine was a real culprit too. And because this didn't seem to get better from last year, it's clear John Paxson must have felt that Hoiberg couldn't get through to him. There were times this year when you couldn't blame LaVine for any shot he took. Look at the lineup he's in. Not one shooter among them, so there's no space for him to get going, and he opts for a step-back 20-footer while being harassed. Stagnant is also a word that can be often used to describe the Bulls' offense. Something went wrong with this high post entry as it left everyone standing around waiting for someone else to do something. The handoff should have created an opportunity for Holiday, who's open on the wing. Instead, LaVine opts for an 18-foot fadeaway. Notice how long it takes for this pick and roll to develop out of motion weak. LaVine has to wait for almost 2 seconds till it's set, and in his effort to put his defender in jail behind him, he completely misses Archidicano wide open on the wing for a three, instead shooting a step-back 18-footer. More waiting for the ball screen, and instead of trying to aggressively force a rotation with a strong drive, he just burps up a terrible fadeaway 20-footer with Bledsoe in his face. Studying the after timeout plays, I didn't see a ton of clever sets, but what stood out the most was a distinct lack of execution of all the small details. And when you're outmanned and out-talented, you'd better get the small stuff right. This looks to be pistol action, a dribble handoff to inside ball screen. But Parker is coming to set this screen at a weird angle, and it takes too long for him to even get there. They miss Markkanen down low with a perfect mismatch, and Hutchison cuts into a crowded lane and throws up a wild one. Watch Parker on this set as he doesn't even attempt to set the slice screen at the block, and the timing is simply way off as Markkanen has to stand there for almost 4 seconds waiting for the ball screen. Parker slips this so easily that it leaves Markkanen out to dry under heavy pressure. When it reverses back to him, he's unable to beat his man off the dribble, is forced to turn his back, gets caught in the air, and flings a desperate pass out to the perimeter for a tough shot. Here's a staple of Hoiberg's offense as they get handoff into flat ball screen out top, and the ball screener then pin downs for Holiday. Not the worst shot, but there could be much better shots out there on this promising initial action. Here's more of Hoiberg's pet weave action out top, but notice how so much of these actions does not lead to any type of threat of scoring. They almost get blind pig, but Harrison doesn't get open on the back door. And this is actually good offensive flow, but hardly anyone is looking to score. They finally get deep penetration, but don't take the corner three, and make all this into a terrible turnover. On this set play, Hutchison is in the wrong place to start, as Lopez is trying to tell him where to begin, but Payne takes the position for the zipper cut. The screen and rescreen gets Payne some daylight, but with the way he shoots the ball, even though I'm faulting the Bulls for not shooting enough threes, This one was a bad decision. I suspect Fred Hoiberg would almost feel relieved to get away from Chicago at this point. The pressure must have been almost unbearable, and the frustration on his part with Gar Pax and their funky roster constructions must have been at maximum. Now, we have to deal with the confusion of having Jim Boylen as the head coach, but not Jim Boylen. Boylen, and he's stepping into a pretty good situation theoretically. All he has to do is continue Markkanen's development as a power forward and occasional small ball center, continue to groom Wendell Carter Jr., who is going to be an absolute stud on both ends of the court, lose a bunch of games to get a shot at the high pick in a very talented draft, and wait till Jabari Parker moves off the books to start a fresh new era in Chicago. There's not a ton of confidence in what the front office will do with this situation, but it's going to be awfully hard to picture them screwing it up. Sports fans, make sure to hit the subscribe button and adjust your settings so you can get notified immediately when we drop another great NBA video. Let us know how you feel with a thumbs up and a comment. After all, at BBallBreakdown, we're not a channel, we're a conversation. You in?